Good evening. Welcome to the regular monthly meeting and BOCES budget meeting for the Lynbrook Board of Education dated April 26, 2022. If we can all please rise, and Mr. Yaker will leave us in the pledge to the flag. Roll call, Terry. All are present except for Mrs. Danino, who is excused. Can I have a motion to accept the minutes of March 9th, 2022 regular meeting? Mrs. Hanson, second Mrs. Marcus. All in favor? May I have a motion to accept the minutes of the March 23rd, 2022 work session? Mr. Pileski, second Mr. Yaker. All in favor? Mr. Kunz, Art Gallery, please.
The Burns-Seiderman Gallery is proud to present the April 2022 show entitled In the Shadows. In the Shadows features sculptures that are inspired by the work of Steve Casino, Penny Hardy, Tim Noble, and Sue Webster. In the rear of the gallery are abstract works of art which, upon first glance, look nothing other than straightforward junk sculptures. The excitement for the viewer comes when a single light illuminates the junk and creates an entirely new piece of artwork in shadow on the back wall of the gallery. The abstract additive sculptures on the walls in the middle of the gallery are assemblages of white plastic and were created to illustrate themes such as lift, movement, and form. These abstract sculptures cast beautiful shadows on the walls of the gallery when illuminated as the light travels through the voids of the negative space. In the front of the gallery are works inspired by Steve Casino's Little Monsters series. These sculptures were created using Sculpey oven-baked clay and painted using acrylic paint. The relationship between the creatures and the containers are what make these sculptures so special. Please take a moment to enjoy this month's show, In the Shadows. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kunz. Presentations, Dr. Burak.
Thank you. I was walking around before the board meeting looking for people because I do not see them here. So I understand there was a vacation in the middle, so perhaps people forgot. But I will recognize 3 students who were invited, I believe, but we will get the word and the shirt to them shortly. But New York State, the legislators held a virtual art exhibit. And of all of the artists in New York State, Lynbrook Public Schools had 3 of our students who were featured in this virtual art exhibit, which is actually a very nice honor to have. And I wanted to recognize Ronan Mansfield, Amelia Policino, and Gianna Marafiote. Is there anyone? Oh, I do. There you are. Yes, yes. So Gianna, her project was entitled Picasso Shoe, so one can just visualize what that shoe may have looked like. So congratulations, Gianna, and we want to recognize you. You get a solo picture now. You can come up. Congratulations. And secondly, every year our schools participate in the New York State PTA Reflections competition. And there are several categories: a primary division, intermediate, middle, senior, and a special artist. And there are different categories: award of merit, award of excellence, with award of excellence being the highest honor. And you can be a Nassau County winner. You can move on to the state level for the competition. We have a New York State Award of Excellence winner. So of all of the submissions on in the primary division, we have Cece Farr of West End, who won for her photography submission. And the theme this year was I Will Change the World By. And she has a picture of a strapping young individual. I'm sure you know who this person is, with a cape and a bucket. And it says, you don't have to be a superhero to change the world. So very nice. Grade 1, CC Farr, New York State. So that's a very nice competition PTA does every year. So those are our presentations this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Burek. We have a couple of retirements this evening. I believe Nellie Lombardi is not here. Mr. Murray, do you have that retirement?
Yes, thank you. Whereas Mrs. Nellie Lombardi, bilingual clerk typist in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2022, after serving 6 years in the high school guidance department in Lynbrook High School. And whereas Mrs. Lombardi has been a welcomed addition to the Lynbrook High School guidance department, where she became part of the family and will be missed by all as she begins her next chapter. And whereas Mrs. Lombardi was always a welcoming person to greet students, staff, and visitors into the counseling center. And whereas Mrs. Lombardi was invested in the success and well-being of all students and their families. And whereas Mrs. Lombardi was eager to support students, families, and staff to provide translation services during phone conferences and meetings. And whereas Mrs. Lombardi has been helpful to provide resources and to support families in need. And whereas Mrs. Lombardi has tried to retire from the guidance department at least 2 times before, but she just wasn't ready to let them go. And whereas, probably that they weren't ready to let her go. And whereas Mrs. Lombardi has spent many years graciously hosting international students in her home. And whereas the Board of Education thanks Mrs. Lombardi for her commitment to the Lynbrook schools and wishes her a happy and healthy retirement to spend quality time with her family, especially her grandchildren, Luca and Mia. Nellie hopes to teach her grandchildren to be multilingual in English, Spanish, and French. Nellie loves to travel, speaks several languages herself, and looks forward to traveling the world with her husband, Robert. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mrs. Nellie Lombardi for the purposes of retirement.
Just confirming, Benjamin Ferrante is not here. Mr. Yeager, please.
Whereas Mr. Benjamin Ferrante, front door monitor in the Lynbrook Union Free School District, has announced his intention to retire effective April 29th, 2022, after 17 and a half years of dedicated service to the students and faculty of Lynbrook High School and the Lynbrook Public Schools. And whereas over the course of this period, Mr. Ferrante was primarily responsible for the safety of everyone at the high school, a responsibility he took seriously and fulfilled faithfully, keeping an ever-watchful eye on the comings and goings of students, staff, and visitors. And whereas Mr. Ferrante always assisted in any way to help keep the students and staff safe, passing on to building administration observations and weaknesses in building security. And whereas, as for the seriousness of Ben's demeanor, those who knew him also knew that within there was a dry and wry wit that always caught listeners off guard. And whereas the Board of Education thanks Mr. Ferrante for his dedicated service to the Lynbrook schools and wishes him a happy and healthy retirement filled with time spent with his bride Felicia, visiting his daughters Ariel and Angela, vacationing at the best golf resorts and beaches, eating great Chinese food, and playing all the golf he desires. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the resignation of Mr. Benjamin Ferrante for purposes of retirement.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager. Carol Isaacson, if you could please stand up. Whereas Ms. Carol Isaacson, teacher assistant at the Kindergarten Center, has announced her intention to retire effective June 30th, 2022, after 19 years in the Lynbrook School District. And whereas Mrs. Isaacson began working in the Lynbrook School District July 2003 as a substitute teacher at Marion Street, West End, and Waverly Park. She joined the Kindergarten Center staff in February 2007 as a teacher assistant and has generously shared her love for early childhood education. And whereas Mrs. Isaacson has been part of a beautiful community at the Kindergarten Center, her dedication to her colleagues, students, and families was apparent every day. You can always count on Mrs. Isaacson to be a collaborator, whether producing new art projects, helping in any way possible, and putting a smile on the faces of all kindergarten students, especially in the classroom with Mrs. Schroeder and Mrs. Edegon. And whereas Mrs. Isaacson raised her family in the Lynbrook School District, she will now be able to spend time with her husband Carl, taking long walks, traveling to Florida, and enjoying time with her children, Lauren, Michelle, Jonas, Jason, and Katie. She's especially looking forward to spending weekends with her granddaughters, Amelia and Zoe. The time has come for Mrs. Eisen to enjoy her granddaughter's ballet recitals, book club, friends, and family. Your friends at the Kindergarten Center will miss you. All right. We'll go with that. Terry, these will all be consent agendas? Okay. We don't have to, it's consent. The truth is that was not the end, but it was, I knew when it was written that would end up being the end, but it was too good a moment, so we'll leave it like that. So at this time, if Carol, you and your crew and your family would like to depart to enjoy whatever festivities you have planned, we'll give you 30 seconds to a minute to do so. Well, Janikoff, that means you're staying. All right, moving on to report from trustees. Diversity Council. Mrs. Marcus, can you report?
During the last Diversity Council meeting, this year's goals and priority areas 1 and 2 were discussed. I'm pleased to report that in priority area 1, which is developing inclusive curriculum, instruction, and assessment K through 12, all 3 goals were met. These include monthly discussions of the New York State Education Department Culturally Responsive Sustaining Education Framework, professional development on topics such as managing difficult conversations, culturally responsive pedagogy, and inclusive practices, and electing student leaders to serve as contributing members of the District Diversity Council. In addition, there has been progress made in all 4 continuing goals in priority area 2, which is strengthening and creating opportunities, access, and educational equality for all students in our diverse community. These goals include ongoing assessment of instructional approaches, curriculum taught and assessed, and events celebrated, age-appropriate sensitivity workshops, supporting students and families with diverse needs, and analyzing data for inequities and/or opportunity gaps. Priority areas 3 and 4 will be the topic of the next meeting, which is currently scheduled on June 7th.
Thank you, Ms. Mark. Anything else from the board?
I just wanted to say that I had the opportunity to see the High School Musical. And if you didn't, you really missed out on something. Les Mis is a hard show to begin with, and the performances that our high schoolers put on would do a traveling professional theater company proud. I mean, it was really something to see, and it was great to have that in our newly refurbished auditorium. The acoustics were incredible. And then just in my own life as a principal in another district, I happened to walk into a virtual enterprise trade show where one of our Lynbrook teams was selling and doing a very good job. They had an awesome business idea to have basically electronically coded locks, so that all you needed to do was, it was almost like a key fob for a car, remote start, except it would open your house, it would open your car, you could customize it. So that's the business model they put together, and they did a really good job selling it to the people at the trade show. So I was just proud to see our Lynbrook students at work out in the world.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. I also just wanted to take a moment, Mr. Reynes, to you, your staff, and to Mrs. Mitchell, to congratulate you on the extremely impressive colleges that our students have got into this year. Now, Lynbrook has a lot of different stakeholders. Some of our students are looking to go to four-year schools, others go to vocational trades, some go into the military. There's a lot of different paths they want to go on, and we try to put our students in the best situations they can be in. But and as I think you and I discussed, it's maybe been 7 or 8 years till we had such an impressive number of students going to some of the top schools in the country, which is a real credit to our teaching staff. And it goes all the way down to kindergarten center. You don't just become a great student when you get into 9th or 10th grade. It's the manner in which we as a district, how we handle our students, how we treat them from the kindergarten all the way through. So it was really very impressive this year. So congratulations to you, the guidance staff, and then all the way down to the kindergarten staff. I'm sure Mrs. Janikoff will take a lot of credit for my kids, but it really was an impressive thing, so congratulations on that. Old business, Dr. Burke?
Yes, I'm actually going to turn it over to Dr. Lynch. In previous meetings, there has been some discussion about the elementary school lunch, so Dr. Lynch held several meetings with the stakeholder group, so I'm going to allow him to report.
Thank you, Dr. Burek. So this is under really old business, so we're going to have to get into a time machine to really understand where this conversation began. So once every 5 years, the district puts out a bid for new food service. That bid was due to be up in June of 2020. So we started this conversation that I'm continuing tonight in 2018. And what we were starting to do at that time was to reimagine what the food program would look like in the next 5 years. One of the things that was a lot of interest was expressed in was lunch at the elementary level. So we started to do our homework to find out what that would look like. I don't know if you heard it, but we had a little pandemic in between. So what happened is the state allowed us to do 2 emergency contracts without a bid, and we basically just rolled the program for 2 more years. So this year, we started those same conversations that we started all those years ago. And so what we did is we have a food committee. So there is a committee that meets every month, and it is composed, or every other month, and it is composed of the principals, some parents, and most importantly, students who discuss the state of our food program. So we expanded that committee this year to include representatives of the elementary schools, since they would be the key stakeholders in the design of the new program. So we started to do some homework, and in the middle of all of that, we found out that next year we don't have to do a bid again. So that's good news. It doesn't mean that we don't get to entertain an elementary school program, but rather than keeping our current, that's the cafeteria over there, that's the where the food is served. So rather than keeping Aramark out of the conversation, who's the incumbent holder of the contract, we got them on board to help us think about what a program would look like. They had great experience in a very similar district who were coming from similar circumstances up in Syosset, where they developed a program about 3 years ago at the elementary schools, again, coming from similar age of buildings, similar facts that were going on. So we brought them on board, and we started to do some homework there. We hired, and the board brought on a consultant to help us think through some of the issues. One of the big things that we started to talk about is that the introduction of an elementary school program will have drastic input or an effect on the elementary special lunch program. So once a food contractor enters a school building, they now have rights to all food that's served in the building. So now they get to say whether there is Pizza Friday and whether the PTA gets to sell that. So that became part of the some of the discussions. So we had a great meeting with Food Committee, and the mission was for the members of the Food Committee to go back to their local PTAs and share what we learned. And in the meantime, the district had to do, well, what would it take us to get a program up and running? So we had some, I would say, mixed reviews coming back from the elementary PTAs. And I guess I could sum it up in one word. Anyone who had experience of food that was of high quality, so people who knew in detail about the Syosset program, were all on board saying, you know, this could be a great program with that quality of food. Some people who are used to might be what has been served at our middle schools in the past were like, well, if that's going to be the quality, I'm not so sure we should be giving up special lunch for that. And this is really a good, I don't even want to call it a debate, a discussion that was happening in the room. So that was one side of the conversation. The other side of the conversation is that myself, Mr. Sater, and the folks from Aramark started to find out what would be required to launch a program that looks like the Syosset program in our schools. So we did discover that it would take about an investment of about $300,000 to put in hot and food cold service. So now we're coming up to a point of law. So I hate to say it, but even the board is not allowed to approve an expenditure of that size. That size, an investment, is only subject to voter approval. So we would have to have put that into the budget for the voters to say, yes, go ahead and buy $300,000 worth of equipment. So therefore, we had to say, you know, we probably can't move in the all-out way that some thought that we could do. So Aramark came back to the table, and they came up with an idea that we brought back to Food Committee that maybe we could do a pilot, and maybe 1 or 2 days a week next year, we could start with a cold-only program. Serve salads, serve yogurt parfaits, serve sandwiches, and see how that goes to see what the interest would be. They would not have rights to kick out special lunch because at that point they don't own the contract. So in discussing this with the Food Committee, I think people felt reasonably sure that this would be kind of a good middle ground to go. So the Food Committee is actually, our food director, I emailed him today. We're going to be setting up an actual tasting where members of the Food Committee would get to find out what that food would taste like. And we will come out with a more mature program. And then we want to put out a survey. We feel there's no reason to put out a survey to parents if parents don't know what the food's going to look like. You know, we could say, do you want a program? Yeah, sure, I want a program. I don't want to make lunch in the program. Well, do you want a program if it's, you know, like I used to eat, like bad tuna fish sandwiches that were warm? But if that may not be as that was a joke. Sorry about that. Yeah. And unfortunately, because of streaming, it's there forever. When you bomb, it's like Johnny Carson, you bomb forever. So that is where we're at. We will then put out a survey to the general community, and we will see whether there is interest in moving forward. But I think the idea of maybe moving towards a pilot is really the best way to go. So the Food Committee will hopefully have some more recommendations for you as we come through. But we just thought this would be a good chance to update the board fully on what's been going on and the community as well.
And may I just make a suggestion to have the tasting include some of the elementary students?
That's a great
because the
idea.
Adult palate is a little different than the elementary student palate.
Question has breakfast been part of these discussions at all, or are we pretty much just sticking to lunch?
Well, if we went with the full-on program, we could entertain breakfast. I don't think that would be advisable for the pilot next year. We currently serve breakfast in this building and in the
Right.
2 middle schools.
Right.
So it would be comparable, but we would, you know what it is? You need hot tables. You need to be able to preserve the food. The Department of Health comes in and decides, you know, an awful lot of oversight at that point.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Lynch. So one of the reasons we're here tonight is to adopt the BOCES budget, Resolution 2204G1, whereas the Board of Cooperative Educational Services of Nassau County, hereinafter Nassau BOCES, has proposed and presented its proposed administrative operations budget for 22 through 23 school year, July 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2023. Now therefore be resolved that the Nassau BOCES proposed administrative operations budget for the 22 to 23 school year in the amount of $23,788,373 hereby is approved by the Board of Education of the Lindbergh Union School District. May I have a motion to adopt the budget, please? Mr. Yeager, second, Mr. Murray. All in favor? Thank you. We also have the BOCES Board candidates. Resolutions 2204G2, whereas the Board of Education of the Lindbergh Union Free School District may cast their vote for the 3 vacancies to be filled on the Board of Cooperative Services in Nassau County, and now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Lindbergh Union Free School District cast their votes for Ronald Ellerby, Frank Lagsner, and Robert B.A. Schoen. May I have a motion to adopt the resolution? Mrs. Hanson, second, Mrs. Marcus. All in favor? Thank you. Dr. Burek, Superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you very much. About a month ago, I delivered a Blackboard Connect message announcing the new principal of Lynbrook High School. It's my understanding that when the message was delivered, there were shouts in the hallways of Lynbrook High School, which is always a good sign, and I think that the board and administration feels gratified that, you know, we made the right decision. So it's my great pleasure to officially announce at a board meeting that Mr. Matthew Sarosi will take on the principalship of Lynbrook High School beginning in September. So the embarrassment now begins, Mr. Sarosi, so stand up. So I know his adorable family is here, so they get to hear all of the things that I'm going to say about Mr. Sarosi. For those of you who do not know, Mr. Sarosi has actually been employed in the Lynbrook Public Schools for 16 years. He began as a social studies teacher in North Middle School, and then he moved on to the assistant principalship of Lynbrook High School in 2012, where he oversaw the day-to-day operations for students in grades 9 and 10. Lynbrook High School, for those of you who don't know, and I know all the teachers know who go on my new teacher orientation bus tour, Lynbrook High School is the oldest still functioning high school building on Long Island. So it was created in 1920 as a high school, and it's still operating as a high school, and it's the oldest on Long Island. So in that more than 100-year history, Mr. Sarosi will only be the 10th high school principal. Which is pretty amazing when you think about that. 10's a good number. He also served as interim principal of South Middle School last year for a short stint. Perhaps he got a taste of what it's like to be in the top spot, and here we go. So that practice paid off for him. So he oversaw the return to in-person learning, which we all know was a challenge for anyone. So to be an interim and to deal with that was especially challenging. And he listened to the input of teachers, staff members, parents, and students. So we saw during that time that he was very much a collaborator, and he worked cooperatively with all of the stakeholders to produce the best environment for the students. Only recently I learned that he had the moniker of Mr. Class Night. With no further ado, it is my pleasure to promote Mr. Class Night to Lynbrook High School principal. So congratulations again, Mr. Sarosi. I have some other good news. The state budget, when it was finalized, our overall state aid package really didn't change greatly, except there was a significant increase in one particular category, and that was the category of aid for the universal pre-K program. So previously I had announced that there were 66 slots, and we are holding a lottery for those 66 slots. The lottery is actually taking place on Thursday at 10 o'clock. It will be live streamed for anyone who wants to watch it. But that because of the additional state aid, those 66 slots have now been increased to 94. So that is a significant increase, and I'm sure it will make a lot of parents of pre-K students very happy. There's actually We just have a few more than that who signed up for the lottery. So we have about 100 people who submitted for a lottery, and we have 94 slots. So I'm sure people will be very happy. And once again, that lottery is going to take place on Thursday, and you can find the link on the website. The next item is our fiscal reserve plan. This is something that we must do annually, so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lynch to explain our fiscal reserves.
So we're in the process where the budget will be voted upon by the voters on May the 17th. So we're in the final days, and there's a bunch of legal requirements. And one of them is the board has to adopt a reserves plan. So it's our plan, if we have money left over this year with our fund balance, where we would be putting the money. So it is a aspirational plan because we don't know what that money is yet, but it basically establishes the board's priorities, and it gives you, the voters, a chance to know what that will look like when you vote on the budget. Be posted online tomorrow. That's
Thank you. And Dr. Balekis, curriculum update.
Thank you, Dr. Burak. Today I'm actually going to speak a little bit about the federal monies that we receive. We have all different title grants. Typically, Lynbrook has received titles 1 through 4. You know, basically we've used those grants for the last few years to increase our social worker and psychological supports. We were able to introduce a director of guidance and an E&L chairperson, and those were great additions to our staff for, you know, all different types of reasons and giving kids the supports they need. The new federal grants, we received 3 different types of grants over the last year. So we received these ESSER funds, they're called, GEAR funds, and ARP funds. What we're able to do with those is actually bring in a lot of different supports that were really necessary in the district, helping us through this COVID pandemic. So some of the things that we were able to bring in on the staffing side, we were able to increase our support with our special education chairperson. So we have 3 administrators that are overseeing that program that can give families and students more specialized attention. We were able to bring in a fleet of kindergarten center TAs so that each kindergarten classroom this year had their own TA assigned to help with the transition for students that may or may not have had a real preschool experience. We were able to bring in, again, more social workers, psychologists, special education support. We had a summer enrichment program last year, and this year we're going to expand some of the offerings that we offered during our summer high school. Next year, we'll be seeing an increase in both our ELA and health staff as we transition our writing lab and our health classes to the 9th grade, where the kids can benefit from the instruction for their 4 years in high school. We've been able to offer supports in the middle school in the before school hours to students who need extra social work, psychological supports to get ready for the school day. We were able to bring in behavior intervention specialists to come and help with children that had some hard times transitioning back into the full school environment. And last but not least, I have to give a shout out to the entire back of the room. You know, one of the big things that we were able to accomplish this year with the help of all those lovely folks in the back was we were able to start our Science of Reading initiative. You know, we brought in 2 new programs, Itchy's Alphabet and Sounds Right. With all the hard work and dedication of our staff members back there, everybody pitched in so that we could keep the kids moving forward while the training was going on. And one of the best testaments to all of their efforts, one of our consultants that was working with us for years came back this year in the spring and gave them the best compliment ever. I've never seen kindergartners who can read and write like this. And these are kids that came off a pandemic nonetheless. So for that to happen this year of all years, you know, kudos to all of you, especially Lisa, since she's been called out so many times tonight. Thank you.
The whole staff stayed this evening because they were getting all this praise all night long. So very smart move. Everything you needed to know, you learned in kindergarten. Remember that. So congratulations. Thank you, staff, for doing that. And I'm going to turn it back to Dr. Lynch for the capital projects update.
Okay, so the capital projects update, as you know, the high school is still in punch list, so it looks great, but there's still stuff going on. Marion Street is also slow and steady, wins the race. There is actually a moving platform there now, so that's a good thing. So we do hope to have that up and running by the end of the year. Then the upcoming projects, we're waiting for the Waverly Park courts to come, the handball courts and the basketball courts to come out of state ed, and we should hopefully be putting that out to bid within the next month or so. And the high school library project is going to head to the state probably by the end of this month.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Burek. Thank you, Lynch. This time we're going to move to public comment. If anyone would like to address the Board of Education, please come to the microphone. Identify yourself by name and if you live in or out of the district.
Resident. Dr. Lynch, I'm just curious about the new food program. Is it going to be peanut free, or is it going to be any
We always we can never guarantee peanut free. We are sensitive to allergies, so that is put into the program design. That was actually something very much expressed by the food committee. So that will be taken. Kids' allergies will be taken under consideration.
Okay, great, thank you.
Moving on, we have one sympathy resolution this evening from Margaret Rosado. Whereas the members of the Board of Education of the Lynbrook Union Free School District have learned with sorrow of the passing of Margaret Rosado, former employee in the Lynbrook School District. And whereas Margaret Peggy Rosado served as a guidance secretary at Lynbrook High School for 22 years, from 1982 through 2004. And whereas the Board of Education is mindful of the contributions made to our district by Peggy during her years of service to our community. Be it resolved that the Board of Education records its sorrow, its sympathy, and the esteem in which Peggy Rosado was held. And be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to the family of Peggy Rosado with the hope they will find solace and comfort in the rich heritage of good works for which she is remembered and revered. We have a few donations this evening. The board gratefully acknowledges the following donations: $2,305 from the Marion Street PTA to be used to fund assemblies, $500 donation from the Community Chest South Shore for the assistance of a family whose children attend the Lynbrook Public Schools, a donation from Home Depot of supplies valued at approximately $350 to be used at the Waverly Park School for its school musical. Also, as a reminder, we have Meet the Candidates Night is May 2nd at 7:30 in this cafeteria. It will also be live streamed. We have a budget hearing and a regular meeting on Wednesday, May 4th at 7:30, and the budget vote is Tuesday, May 17th. Superintendent's recommendations. We have two additional resolutions that were not originally included in the published packet: a resignation and a long-term substitute appointment. They will be included on the consent agenda. I'd like to ask for a consent agenda on resolutions 2204C1 through 2204C21, 2204NC1 through 2204NC8, 2204G3 through 2204G24. May I have a motion, please? 2204G44. Mr. Murray, second. Mr. Plesky. May I have a motion to, all in favor of that motion? May I have a motion to accept, what did Janikoff tell you to throw me off? May I have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Mr. Murray, second. Mrs. Marcus, all in favor? That's it. Good night. Get home safely.